Hello there, I'm Andrea Hall-Wegner, CEO of Health Stand Nutrition, and I'm talking all things sugar today. Ooh, it's a juicy topic. As the chocoholic nutritionist herself, what I didn't want to do is give you more tips about what you could substitute when you're talking about a sweet craving for something. But what I do want to do is dive into how do we manage sweets? How do we manage our love of sugar? How much is too much? And how do you make sense of this in the midst of trying to live a balanced life, healthy eating, and what you do with your family? So join me on this video as I explore how to eat less sugar, but still save room for your favorites. This is a good, juicy topic that I'm excited to share with you today. So I've put a link in the post there that you can feel free to go and check out. I've got lots of information about what I'm going to talk about today in case you wanted a print-friendly sort of version of some of the core things I'm going to speak about on sugar today. But sit back, relax, and tune in. If you're joining me live, would love to hear from you in the comments about any of your struggles, challenges, thoughts as we go through diving into a fantastic subject that a lot of people struggle with. So first of all, I want to get into the science of sugar, because I think unless we understand the science of what sugar actually is, what it does in the body, it's difficult to even kind of move forward from there. So first of all, when we're talking about sugar, what I want you to know is it is a carbohydrate. And of course, carbohydrates, there's so much confusion around carbohydrates. Really at the end of the day, carbohydrates are sugar to your body. And if you think about if I was wearing a pearl necklace around my neck here, and if each one of those pearls on the necklace represented a sugar molecule, that's what I want you to start thinking about all carbohydrates look like to your body. So the type of carbohydrates that you're going to find in things like fruit or in lactose, which is the carbohydrate found in milk and yogurt, is more simple types of sugar. And those are more single and double beads of sugar, back to our analogy here. And what we know is the type of sugar that we find in sweets like honey, white sugar, brown sugar, coconut sugar, all the trendy agave syrups, and the list goes on. All of them to your body look very similar to actually fruit. So if one day your kid comes home from school and says, hey, mom or dad, I learned something really interesting today. Pretty much drinking cola beverages is pretty much the same as having a banana or an apple in the morning. Technically, they wouldn't be incorrect from the science of what we know about carbohydrates. So simple sugars are definitely more those single and double units of sugar. And that's what we find in sticks of licorice, candy, coconut sugar, and brown sugar, and the list goes on. Very, very similar there. But of course, when people say, well, I know that eating a stick of licorice or candy is not as nutritious as eating an apple or an orange. Of course, we know that's correct, because whole foods, your fruits and your veggies, of course, have all different types of vitamins, minerals, fiber, and phytonutrients good for health. But when it comes to the carbohydrate or the sugar level, at times they can look very, very similar to the body. So I just wanted to bring that into sort of a context of normalizing sugar, so you're not fearful of it, because there's no sense in being afraid of sweets, regardless if you're looking to sort of improve your overall health, or maybe if you even have something like diabetes. Just because you've got diabetes, or let's say you're looking to lose some weight, does not mean you need to go completely sugar-free in your diet, which may be good news for some of you. And for some of you watching my video here, you might be even more confused, but stay tuned. I'm going to dive into what is going on when we get into sugar here. So what we know about sugar from a science perspective is that we're not worried from a health perspective about the types of sugars found in natural foods. So when we're talking about fruits, we're talking about veggies, or the lactose sugar found in milk and yogurt. Of course, we get carbohydrates, more complex carbohydrates, in things like pasta rice, potatoes, yams, legumes, lentils, chickpeas, the list goes on there, and all of our grains and starchier types of foods. We're not worried about that type of carbohydrates from a health perspective. In fact, people that eat the most plants coming from fruits, veggies, whole grains, and legumes actually have some of the healthiest diets on the planet. So we're not talking about going totally sugar-free, totally carb-free. We're talking about understanding how to reduce added sugars. And added sugars are those that are going to be added to our foods from a flavor perspective. And notice I said the word reduce, and being sort of, we're looking at how much of them. We're not eliminating them, because that wouldn't be any fun. We're all always going to enjoy the taste of sweet, fats, and savory things, and salt. That's just how we're born to love those things. So trying to eliminate anything usually leads to overconsumption later. So at the end of the day, we're after added sugars. Those are going to be defined as, I'll look at my list here, glucose, fructose, table sugar, which is known as sucrose. We're also looking at things like honeys, syrups, and fruit concentrates added to fruits or to foods from a flavoring perspective. So those are the ones that we're going to, of course, find in pops, in desserts, in candies, desserts of all different types, granola bars, those kind of things. So again, we're not about eliminating them, but what I am going to ask you to think about as we go through some of my points today is, how do we become more mindful about what's really worth it, and make sure that we're really spending those sugar grams in a thoughtful way, and in a way that really provides soulfulness in the aspect of how you live your life, and maybe giving up some that are just sort of not that important. Okay, so first of all, before we get into some strategies, I want to talk about why having too much sugar is actually bad for your health. So I think we're all aware of the fact that Canadians are consuming maybe too much sugar. Same thing in the US, and actually all over the world. As we move to sort of more Western-based diets, we see people pick up way more sugar in their diet. And we know too much sugar is actually really not great from an overall risk of obesity. This doesn't mean, though, that again, you need to eliminate it. It's about being mindful. We also know that excess sugar can actually be a problem from a dental perspective. So just contributing to more dental caries. The higher the sugar intake in your diet, the more likely that you're at risk for more dental issues. Again, the other thing about sugar, as I look at kind of the notes I wanted to share with you today, is that if our diet is too high in sugar, it probably means that we're not going to have enough room or enough of our calories left from an overall health perspective to get all of the other essential nutrients that we need. So key vitamins and minerals and fiber tend to go down in our diet if we're having too much sugar. And also there's some other growing sort of evidence in science that if we're taking in too much sugar, it could affect what's known as triglycerides in your blood. And triglycerides are another blood fat that floats around in the body similar to cholesterol. And we know if your diet is really high in sugars, it could put your triglycerides in a higher place there. So that is why we're worried about sugar. Giving you the science, it's always my favorite place to start. I want to dive into the very common question that we get asked here in our practice: how much sugar is actually okay to eat then? If some is okay, what are we actually talking about? So the World Health Organization suggests that less than 10% of your overall calories should come from sugar. They also say, and that's mostly from what we're seeing in obesity-based research, we know if you've got more overall calories coming from sugar, we just see a higher risk of obesity. They also say a further reduction to less than 5% of your calories doesn't really provide any additional benefit from what we see in obesity research, but it could provide additional benefit from what's going on with your teeth. So your dentist would probably like this. A little less sugar in your diet even, is just going to be good for your overall teeth health. So I want to put that into like real terms of what does 10% of your calories even look like? Because people don't think in percentages, they think in food. And so when we break that down, 2,000 calories is like, if we use that as an average, and some of you, of course, watching this video will need far more than that if you're active or you're taller. Some of you will need less if you're a smaller female and very much less active. But to use an example of a 2,000 calorie diet, 10% of your overall energy is going to look like about 50 grams of sugar per day. And if I further break that down into what does that actually mean, we're talking about 12 teaspoons of sugar or less per day. And so again, we're having a conversation here about being mindful about our sugar consumption, but not excessively crazy about taking every little morsel out from a flavor perspective. So I want to give you an example of what a couple of foods look like so that you understand sort of like what we're talking about. If we're talking about 50 grams of sugar a day or less than 12 teaspoons of sugar, a can of pop has about 40 grams of sugar in it, which is about 10 teaspoons. A cup of really sugary breakfast cereal has about 15 grams of sugar, or about 4 teaspoons. And a couple of bought cookies, without icing, so we're talking about your standard chocolate chip cookies, which we all love, at least 15 grams of sugar, about 4 teaspoons in there. So just to give you a framework for what that looks like, again, we've got some ability to have some sweets in our diet here from a health perspective without it causing any medical issues. But again, it's just being much more thoughtful. So I want to give you 3 ways to reduce sugar in your diet without feeling deprived, since as the chocoholic nutritionist, if someone told me I had to give up chocolate, life would be over. This would just suck, and I wouldn't want to follow this healthy eating plan. So the first thing I want you to think about in point number 1, and you feel free to log into the link I've left in the post here. You can read along as we go here, or feel free to share that link if you find this helpful. Feel free to share it with family members just to put all this sugar discussion into context for you. So number 1, build a soulful food pyramid of love. We are talking all things lovable here. We are talking about, just like many things in life, not all things matter equally. And so what I want you to do, if you think about this pyramid that you're going to create, so if you think about the top of the pyramid up here, what I want you to think about is up top, what are the absolute most enjoyable sweets? And maybe you can include your favorite junk foods or savory foods here in general, but what are your absolute must-have, live to eat these things, they bring me joy, they're the ones that are my go-to sweet favorite foods. I want you to put them at the top of the pyramid. In our practice, we call these soulful foods, ones that we choose totally for taste, social enjoyment, and fun. They have absolutely nothing to do with choosing them for nutritious reasons. So I'd like to know in the comments, for those of you watching live or those of you watching the replay later, what are your absolute favorite soulful foods when it comes to sweet? Are you someone like me that it's all about chocolate? Or my second sort of favorite is probably some sort of homemade baked treat. So this is usually like homemade cookies that I've usually got from my mom in my freezer. Love my mom for that. Or it could be something like ice cream in the summer months for me, also a top. So that would be, when I'm thinking about what's at the top of the pyramid, that's what I've got on there. And at the bottom of the pyramid would be things like candy. I'm just not a candy person. Doesn't mean for you that you might not have candy at the top of your pyramid. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it asks you to be really thoughtful about what is really worth it. What do I absolutely love? Because when we clarify what's really worth it, it becomes that much easier for us to say no to stuff that's just going to come across your workplace, at a friend's house, or in your household by someone else maybe eating that particular food. It's easier for you to say no to some of those things if you know you've been super intentional about what's really worth it and what's at the top of my pyramid, and I got to make sure to save room for those things that are most delicious. So build a soulful food pyramid. The more we're really clear about this, the easier it is for us to move forward in a must-have to, I can take it or leave it at the bottom of the pyramid. So that is point number 1, is build a soulful food pyramid. Point number 2, eat your top soulful foods with love and joy. We are talking all things here about really guilt-free eating here. We have so many scenarios from the clients we're working with in our practice here, as well as in my online course that I facilitate. People just struggling with food guilt when they are eating their favorite soulful food. They're feeling bad about it, or they're not fully present and enjoying it because in the back of their head, they feel like this is somehow bad, or I'm not worthy of fitting this in, or if I've got a health issue, or if I'm struggling with my weight, I shouldn't be eating this. And it takes away and steals joy. And what I want you to think about is, how do you make eating your soulful food and your favorite sweet at the top of that pyramid the most blissful experience that you could possibly have? And what I know is that a blissful, soulful, sweet experience when I'm eating chocolate is not going to be while I'm driving a car. It's not going to be while I'm watching a movie, completely involved in the movie and sort of half present in eating chocolate. We all do that sometimes, but what I'm going to ask you to consider is there a way when you're eating those soulful foods that you could pause, you could step away from all of the distracted eating that you might be doing and really add some full presence to it? As someone that's found mindfulness such a massively effective tool in so many parts of my life, I know every time I'm struggling with something, if I become more mindful with it and just slow myself down and not be a human doing, but instead be a human being, I know I'm going to have a heck of a lot more success. And so when it comes to soulful foods and your favorite sweets, I want you to eat them away from distraction. Teach your kids this. I teach my son all the time. It's like, we've got to savor our bites and just really enjoy this dessert that we're having. Or if we're having ice cream together, we're just really talking about how delicious it is and the creaminess and what's your favorite way to eat it. Are you stirring it up or are you savoring each and every bite? We're talking about our favorite flavors. And when you do that, when you bring about full positivity and joy in your eating experience, less is always more. So if you think about it, if we're sort of multitasking eating a favorite soulful food as we go, we're just not going to find the same level of enjoyment as if we're fully present to the experience. So we've all had times where, and I'm guilty of this too, we're all in this together. It's not just because you're a dietitian, it somehow is just easier. It's just having the awareness to slow yourself down. But we've had these experiences that I know all of you can relate to, is just suddenly we're eating one of our favorite foods, we're just shoveling it in, and we get to the end of the bag, the box, the bar, the whatever, the plate, and we don't fully remember eating it. And so we want to just slow ourselves down a bit without distraction and really be one, blissfully loving when we're eating our favorite joyful foods. So one of the things I teach my son all the time is when you are eating, just eat. There shouldn't be other stuff going on. TV shouldn't be on. You shouldn't be surfing your phone as you're eating. Really just eat, because when we do, less is always more. So that's number 2, is eat your top soulful foods with love and joy. Tip number 3, choose smaller portions often or larger portions less often. What we know about all the clients that we see here in our practice and those going through my Pursuit of Healthiness online course is that different things work for different people. And so one size is not going to fit all when we talk about how to manage sweets and our favorite sort of savory foods, if you're more of a chipaholic than a chocoholic. Experiment with what is actually going to be more effective with you. We know we have some clients that if we ask them to have tiny little portions of soulful foods every day, such as just have like a square of chocolate every day and see if that works. We know for a lot of our clients that simply would not be effective, because one square would lead to 2, lead to 3, 4, and a whole bar. And so, and to be honest, I'm probably a bit more like that too. Sometimes when it's too downsized in a portion, it's just not enough to reach full levels of satisfaction. So again, I want you to be a little bit more present in your body when you're eating a soulful food and ask yourself, what amount do I need to have that leads to that satisfaction factor? Where is it at? Is it a couple of squares of chocolate and then I can be done? Or a couple of cookies and then I can be done? Because somewhere between eating some tiny little morsel of food, let's say a single Oreo cookie, if Oreo cookies are on the top of your soulful food eating experience, and somewhere between eating the row or the bag mindlessly, and probably not enjoying every single cookie as you go through the rows, somewhere in between there is what I call the satisfaction factor. And we're trying to get to the bottom of where your satisfaction factor is with your favorite soulful food. And this will shift the more enjoyment and less sort of guilt-ridden you feel eating your favorite soulful food, the easier it'll be for you to connect with where on the kind of spectrum that entire piece will live. When you're first starting out kind of in diet recovery, we have a lot of people trying to break out of diet prison that we work with here. And when they're first practicing that, they're going to go from a place of all or none. So they're not going to have any, and then they're probably going to overdo things because they just haven't had them in their life for a long period of time, or they just have been used to eating a really large portion and find it really hard to sort of tail it back. But the more enjoyment and joy and mindfulness you add to your eating experience, and the more permission for guilt-free love of all foods that you allow into your life, the more less really does become more. So just be patient with yourself. It's all about what we call here failing forward. It's being patient that it's not going to work the first time you try it out of the gates. In fact, it's probably not going to work the second, third, or fourth time. We know from a habit formation perspective, it is going to take you probably a couple of months to anchor a new habit. That's what the habit formation research says. I know this sucks, but stick with it long enough to really get a new strategy working for you. So again, back to this point number 3, choose smaller portions often or larger portions less often. Again, really just experimenting with what might work. Are you someone that could have a couple little cookies every day and feel very satisfied with that? Or are you someone that once you have one, it's going to be difficult to stop? And so you might do better off not having cookies in your house, but still allowing yourself permission to eat cookies, but perhaps in just a way that allows a bit more success to happen for you. And that might be going to the coffee shop and having your cookie there, where you're just getting one big cookie at a time and there's no issue with eating down an entire bag. That strategy can work very, very well. The answer, though, is if you've struggled with way overdoing sweets, is I don't want you to completely eliminate them from your house and eliminate them completely from ever eating them again, because there's a basic psychological principle that we all want what we can't have. And so we've got to find a way to have you successfully get sweets into your diet, but eat them in a mindful, respectful way that's good for your soul and also good for your health. Fine balance, isn't it? So those of you joining live, hello. Love to hear from you in the comments what you're thinking of the talk so far, if there's a nugget that I've talked about that was helpful. And those of you watching this on a replay, love to know for you, which of the 3 points is most relevant to you? We've talked about point number 1, build a soulful food pyramid of love, get super intentional about what's really worth it. Tip number 2 was eat your top soulful foods with love and joy. This is all about mindful, less distracted eating. And tip number 3 is really, are you someone that could do the choose smaller portions regularly, have them in your house and you can eat them in a reasonable quantity that's good for health? Or are you someone that is like, when I have something enjoyable, I gotta have a big portion, and therefore it's probably best not to have it stocked in full quantities in large family-sized bags in my house, because it's not gonna end up well, and it's better for me to go out and grab ice cream from the ice cream shop when I have an ice cream craving instead of stocking it in my freezer. So lots of different ways to navigate this, folks. Again, we're all going to sort of connect with something that is going to be different on an individual by individual basis. So the bottom line, again, comes back to this whole concept that it is absolutely not essential to eliminate sugar and sweets out of your diet. In fact, we just only see that for the vast majority of people on the planet, psychologically, when you restrict people, they usually overconsume. That typically is what we see. So at the end of the day, just figure out, using the 3 points that I've given you today, where do I begin? What's one thing that I could do a little bit differently? I know Teresa's joining here on a comment. She says, I have to freeze my cookies, so I mindfully need to take them out beforehand and not just grab a bunch. Love it, Teresa. That works really well for me too, because if I have an entire cookie jar full of fresh baked good stuff on my counter, every time you walk by, there's just this visual cue where you just want to grab the cookies. If they're out of sight, out of mind in your freezer, sometimes that will help you. I know there's going to be some people that watch this video and they'd be like raising their eyebrows thinking, Teresa, I'm glad that works for you, but I like frozen cookies and I'd still eat a whole bunch from the freezer. So if that's you, again, probably you're going to be someone that does better just allowing yourself a larger portion less often, or not stashing them heavily in your home, and really going out and enjoying those things with your kids on Friday nights, or picking up the bag of I don't know, Doritos or whatever your favorite soulful food is, if it's not sweets, at another time. And then just enjoying them when you've got them in the house. So lots of different ways to navigate the very common challenge of how do you eat sweets, but not too much, and manage the overall portion sizes. So one big ask, if you found this video helpful, I'd love you to like my Facebook page, and I'd love you to share this entire post on your Facebook page for other people to either read the link that I've shared with you that goes through the 3 points that I've talked about today, or they can log in, watch the video when they're cooking dinner or driving their kids to work, and just get a sense for maybe some common ways to not eliminate sugar from your diet, but really just really approach things from a much more mindful way. So thanks everybody for joining me. I will see you next week, same time, same place on video here, talking all things healthy but soulful living. We always stand for balance at Health Stand Nutrition. It's never going to be extreme. It's always how do we make this realistic so that the changes can stick. So I'm Andrea Hallwegner, CEO of Health Stand Nutrition, and thanks for watching. Take care.